Senator Liz Krueger.
Thank you, Madam President. On the resolution, so I've listened to the discussion and even the debate going on tonight, and there seems to be a little bit of confusion over what we're arguing about vis-a-vis the one section of the new rules being proposed tonight by Senator Skelos and how it violates or doesn't violate the intent of the New York State Constitution and the language of the New York State Constitution. So just to go backwards a week, in the Rules Committee on January 25th, when I was making the supposition that this was complicated and that we should have a few minutes or days to review with constitutional scholars, and I suggested we not have this rules debate last week, Senator Libous confirmed that the intent behind the change to Senate Rule 2, Section 1, sought to leave the vote for temporary president exclusively to members of the Senate. From the transcript, myself, is it possible that this rule possibly changes the role of the lieutenant governor vis-a-vis tie-breaking votes? Senator Libous, yes, it requires a vote of 32. Senator Liz Krueger, so it would require the vote of 32 in a 31-31 situation in the Senate. Senator Libous, we believe that only members should break the tie in a vote for president of the Senate. So in fact, we are arguing about the role of the lieutenant governor in a casting vote issue on procedure and whether the rules resolution being submitted to us tonight is in violation of the Constitution. And I would argue that it is, that the state constitution and the current Senate rules are clear that the lieutenant governor shall be the president of the Senate, but shall have only a casting vote therein. New York State Constitution, Article 4, Section 6, and current Senate Rule 1, Section 1, current rules being the ones we're using tonight until or if we change them with this resolution tonight. A casting vote is defined many, many places, Mason's Manual, our Constitution, Black's Law Dictionary, as a casting vote is deciding vote by the president, presiding officer of a deliberative body in case of a tie. The only specific constitutional limitation on the lieutenant governor's casting of a vote is found in Article 3, Section 14, which provides that no bill can be passed or become law except by the assent of a majority of members elected to each branch of the legislature. Most constitutional scholars agree this provision prohibits the lieutenant governor to use his casting vote on legislation. But again, I don't believe I've heard any colleagues on this side of the aisle saying we want to recognize the lieutenant governor's casting vote on legislation. We want to assure his constitutionally established right to have casting vote on procedure of the floor of the Senate, including the decision over who ends up the president or majority leader of the Senate in situations where it may be 31-31. And any number of my colleagues have referenced the fact that the history of this portion of our state constitution goes back to the 1700s. And in fact, Alexander Hamilton, a great New Yorker who was a delegate to the U.S. Constitutional Convention, established the purpose and intent of the role of a president outside of being an elected member of the Senate, and the reason that we ought to have a situation where a casting vote can be assured in his Federalist Papers. And in fact, the Federalist Paper number 68, he explained the necessity of a vice president or Senate in the Senate position. To secure definitive resolutions, the Senate president must be able to cast tie-breaking votes, yet be denied a vote at all other times. Therefore, the Senate's presiding officer must not be a member of the Senate, nor should a senator be next in line for the presidency, since the president's successor shall be chosen in the same manner as the president. Now, he was referencing the U.S. Constitution, but he was in fact taking his recommendations and applying them through state constitutions as well as the federal Constitution. Now, there have been debates throughout history in the 1700s, in the 1800s, in the 1900s, and a number of them have been cited here tonight around the issue of who can vote to split a tie when. But I don't believe, Madam President, there is any debate on the powers of Lieutenant Governor to be a casting vote to split a tie on procedural issues here on the floor. This is a fundamental interpretation of our Constitution that we should not allow to go into the rules of our Senate without assurance that they are not intended to violate the Constitution. I cannot vote for these rules tonight because we have seen in recent history, and it has been discussed already, that sometimes you may end up in a tie. You may end up in a tie that it's uncomfortable for everyone on both sides of the aisle. But it is critical, because of that reality, that we not violate our Constitution, and we should not forget the lessons of our founding fathers when they were creating our U.S. Constitution, to recognize the importance of having a mechanism in place to ensure the civil discourse and continuity of government. And so it's a lot of debate, it's a lot of time spent here, which is a good place to have this debate on the floor. One of my colleagues also referenced, well, let's say we put it in the rules of the Senate and we end up in a 31-31 situation, we'll then go and litigate it. Well, we do litigate an awful lot of things, ladies and gentlemen. And I suppose you could argue, because we are the creators of laws, it's appropriate for much of what we do here to end up being the fodder and discussion of courts. But I would argue we don't want to knowingly set ourselves up to have a constitutional dispute through the courts at a time where we might find ourselves in a 31-31 situation. While we've been here this afternoon and this evening, according to the press, Lieutenant Governor Duffy has said he intends to vote if there's a tie situation. He will use his casting vote authority. Governor Cuomo has said he does not agree with these proposed rules. He is clear that it is the constitutional authority of the Lieutenant Governor to use his casting vote to split a tie in situations that we are describing tonight. Yes, we can wait and litigate the whole situation if and when we are in a tie situation, but I would have to argue with all my colleagues it would be far, far better for us not to make this mistake, not to write rules of the Senate that we know not only are a violation of the explicit language of the Constitution, but set us up to be forced into a constitutional challenge lawsuit if and when a time comes. We've not needed to put this language in the rules of the Senate ever before. Not having this language in the rules of the Senate hasn't seemingly done us harm for hundreds of years. So I suppose in urging us to not accept the rules as written, and certainly to remove this section of the rules before we move forward, we ask ourselves the question, why do we need to open ourselves to this problem? Our Constitution is clear. It has protected us for hundreds of years. There's no reason to mess with it here on the floor of the Senate tonight. I urge my colleagues to vote no. Thank you, Madam President.